Hello. Excuse me, clearing my throat right down the microphone. Hello, everybody. Good evening. I hope that you can all hear me okay, because I'd like to get right into this one. Haven't done a live stream for a little while. How you doing, 4DV? How's it going? Wildflower. Hey, how you doing? It has been a minute. I totally agree. As you can see, I've had a bit of a devolution. Hi, Macy. My main camera, I've got this little housing unit that holds the fan that stops it from overheating. I moved my main camera and I've lost the little housing unit, so there's no point in even turning it on because it takes about 10 minutes to overheat. So this is my I'm back to my webcam, hence the very dark image and the weird view. So it doesn't matter. You don't need to see me. You haven't come to see me. Come to hear me. Exactly, Liz. So yeah, thanks for joining me today. Oh, did it? 4DV just said stuff escalated drastically. That's really sad to hear. I was literally just watching the stream, man, and it looked like everything was really quiet. For those of you who don't know, it's the 30th of June today, and that's the date that some members, I'm not going to say the South African populace because I'm sure it's not all of them, but that's the date that the radicals in South Africa set for the deadline for all of the non-South African blacks to get out of their country. And obviously, yes, they only focus all of their energy on the black migrants. They have no problem with the Asians, no problem with the whites, the Europeans. It's just the black ones they want out of their nation. Sad and sorry bunch of people that they are. Not everyone, like I said, only the ones who think this is a good idea, which unfortunately seems to be quite popular. So go figure. I'm over trying to figure out the psyche of the majority of the majority of the noisy South Africans who support this crap. I'm actually just over it. I don't care what they do. They can do what they want. I don't live there. I don't try to get up with it. But yeah. And yeah, the reason it's so endemic, I'm glad you just mentioned that. This is a bit of a side note, but the reason it's so endemic is because your president, Ramaphosa, is an idiot. He's an idiot. I've seen him address this on a couple of occasions now. And the way he's addressed it has been very embarrassing, because the hardest rebuke he's had is to say, "Oh, no, it does need to be dealt with. Leave us to deal with it." He's never once made any inclination that people who carry out xenophobic or Afrophobic attacks should be arrested. He's never spoken about the fact that the law enforcement will inflict heavy penalties on people who are taking the law into their own hands. He's just sitting there watching it happen and being a total and complete embarrassment. So yeah, he's basically advertising to the world that South Africa doesn't condemn what's taken place. So yeah, it's been an ongoing problem with South Africa. Those of you who are members of my channel know that it's probably one of the only political subjects I tackle is South Africa. And ironically, I've always had this view. So I'm not shocked at what's taken place. This is why I'm such a big Julius Malema fan, because he seems to be a break of the monotony in South Africa, unfortunately. But there you go. What can you do? Shout out to Africa for Africans. Thank you very much, sir. You came straight on and supported the work. And we need to get into the subject now, because people who aren't here for South Africa are going to be getting bored already with my talking, not jumping in. And I think I do need to jump in at this stage. So Africa for Africans, thank you very much for your ongoing and constant support. It is very much appreciated. Thank you for $20. Let me give a quick shout out to Mario as well. Thank you very much for the 5 Canadian dollars. He says, did you know the ancient Greek historian Herodotus in the 5th century BC referred to Indian subcontinent as Eastern Ethiopia? I did. And the Greeks used to refer to it as Eastern Ethiopia as well, because it used to, it's a hidden part of history, but it used to be one complete Kushite empire. The remnants of ancient Africans in the Indian subcontinent are still there to this day. They go by different name. I can't remember the name of that. There's a very specific tribe, and they obviously try to give them the false back narrative of slavery, like they do with all of the populations of the Indian Ocean as well, the Caucasians, the Sentinel Islanders, etc., etc. But these are Black Asians who have been there for a very long time. The ones that are in India as well. I'm trying to remember. Someone put the name in the chat if you remember the name of that ethnic group that's in India, and they try to claim that they were brought there during slavery, but it's just nonsense. They always just attach or append the slavery argument because they're too lazy to come up with, or too, I wouldn't say too lazy. They try their best to steal the history of Black people wherever we are. And the easiest way to do that is just to mention slavery, you know, and then nobody asks for the provenance of these people. Nobody asks to, or even tries or attempts to research how old these people are. Nobody takes their oral traditions, and in some cases written traditions, seriously. Everyone just ignores them because the jealous, lighter-skinned person who lives alongside them claims that they were slaves, and therefore no one should investigate the credibility of those claims. And this is how they thank you, the cities. Thank you very much, Neg. Appreciate that. That's correct. That's who I was talking about, the cities. No one thinks it's worth investigating the you know, how true these tales might be. And that's how you steal. That's how you steal Black history. That's how you steal it. But anyway, let's get into it. We're going to be talking about more, unfortunately. We're going to be talking a little bit more about the stealing of Black history. It's interesting, actually, that some of you are saying Dravidians as well, and that's not who I was talking about. I say the cities because they have, obviously, kinky hair. Well, in fairness, many of the Dravidians, the Dalits, these people are every bit as black-skinned as Africans are. They're very incredibly dark, many of these populations, and there are differences that they have straighter hair. But many of them have a very East African phenotype. Many of them, if they were in, you know, Sudan, Ethiopia, Somalia, you may not be able to distinguish them from the local population. So there's another interesting conversation to have around those populations that are just essentially dark-skinned like Africans. So that's a whole nother discussion that we could have there. So it's worth mentioning. Thank you very much. Another $5 from Mario. Mario says, my Indian friend, who is someone from higher up the caste system, told me there are still Black people in India. Yeah, that's correct. It's absolutely correct. We're just talking about them. And that's absolutely correct. There always have been. One part of, obviously, Black history is ignoring the Black population, and when they get brought up, you make the slavery claim, and then if the slavery claim gets refuted, that's when you kind of have a more long, drawn-out discussion. You know, they do it every time. They try to make that claim with the Aita people, the short-statured people. They made the claim that they were slaves initially, and then when they realized that that claim wouldn't wash, they had reduced them in number so much, it's almost to the point where they could just ignore them. So this just happens over and over. In fact, throughout the Indian Ocean, almost in most populations in the Indian Ocean have an existing Black, you know, an extant Black population, most of them, which is interesting. Thank you very much, Angelo, I'm gonna say, or was it Angel Osuat? I'm not sure if it's Angel or Angela, but thank you very much for your £5. You're very much appreciated. And thank you very much, Natal, for your 100 Swedish krona. I know I always say it like that. It must get really dry. I want to start now. So I'm going to just pause really quickly, and we're going to get started because the topic of today's live stream is going to be a bit of a revisit to that god-awful study. Okay, so many of you would have seen the title. I didn't realize how trash this study was. And quick question in the chat quickly. I'm not sure if I put it in the title. Who knows which study I'm talking about? If you know which study I'm referring to, please put the name of the study in the chat. Okay, first person who gives me an answer will get put on the screen whilst I load up some notes. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to quickly load up some notes whilst you guys do that. Boom, boom, boom. What happened there? Yeah, I didn't mean to do that. Let's try that again. It's really annoying. Stupid thing. Okay, you're just being stupid for no reason. Okay. Yes, Wildflower's correct, or quickest of the mark, certainly. She has said the Scheunemann study. And yes, that is exactly the pile of tripe that we're going to be dealing with today. Now, you guys might think I'm being 2017 study, also correct, Neg. So you're both correct. It's 2017 dated study. And you guys might think I'm being a little bit, you know, hyperbolic there with the insults, but this study, I didn't realize how garbage it was. It's really garbage. It's really not a good study, and it really was just an exercise and a rushed response to an argument that Egyptology knew it was losing. Okay, I shouldn't say Egyptology. It was a response to an argument that Eurocentrism knew it was losing control of, because essentially they lost control, or at least they lost the impetus when it came to the anthropological argument. Anthropology supports what we discuss on this channel. Okay, the ancient Egyptians were absolutely anthropologically a African civilization. Could say a black civilization, but you all know what I mean when I say African. And I like to say African because people try to restrict us to the sub-Sahara and this, that, and the other. No, they were an African civilization. Modern, very analogous to modern populations in Africa. So what I mean when I say they were anthropologically African, they were culturally African. We know that already. Every aspect of their culture reflects in modern African societies, from their very scant clothing, men just walking around in loincloths. That's an African thing, once again, not really something reflected in our northern and Eurasian neighbors. They wore African hairstyles, as we know. They wore African clothing. Their women, or their young women, walked around with their breasts exposed, which many people think is uncouth, but you'll know it's very normal in many ethnic groups on the African continent. They had African hair. So hairstyles aside, that the actual texture of their hair was African and did things that you can only do if you possess African hair texture. Their language is incredibly African. And one of the things that I continually getting knocked off my chair in with a lot of the work I'm doing right now with comparative linguistics is how similar the ancient Egyptian language is to modern African languages, including the one of my heritage, which is Yoruba. It has very strong cognates in the Yoruba language, some of which I've spoken about. I think I was speaking about one in the last live stream, was the origin of the word hut or huta, which is ota in Yoruba. Okay, and I spoke about the live stream before, the origin of the word ori in Yoruba, which comes from the hori, meaning head. And it has those kinds of cognates throughout the language, really important core words that are spread throughout the African continent. Now, guys, please, if you're not Yoruba, I'm not trying to make it this is a Yoruba thing, by the way. I'm just explaining that that's the language at the moment that I have access to. But I know these correspondences are seen throughout other African languages, in particular ones that are situated from the Great Lakes, the kind of Proto-Bantu, for want of a better word, languages. They have very strong cognates with the ancient Egyptian language. So we're talking about a civilization that's linguistically, culturally African, biologically in the sense of, we know in terms of their skeletal remains, their limb proportions only cluster with Black African people. We know that their skull shape only clusters with Black African people, particularly those who are in modern day Eastern and Central Africa. Exactly the same body proportions, limb proportions. And we could even go onto their skin and talk about the Anna Marie Makota study, and talk about the fact that they had essentially black skin. This has all been proven. So you can be, you know, you can take this as being controversial, but we're able to provide the studies to support this. Okay. Then, so what we talked about is we talked about culturally, linguistically, biologically, and then I guess the other strand is the genetically, and the fact that this 2017 Scheunemann study, which we're about to go into, this completely bunk and ridiculous study, was a knee-jerk reaction to the fact that the genetic results of the Armana lineage and the 19th dynasty, so the 18th and 19th dynasties, and creeping into the 20th, the kind of New Kingdom lineages, the Ramesside, the like the Ramesside, the Thutmoside, and the Amarna lineages, they had all of their DNA taken by Zahi Hawass and co. That was the biggest mistake Zahi Hawass ever made, because independent. And oh, by the way, on that note, let's give a quick shout out to Trill Black, who did a fantastic video the other day. And he put me down as a reference, actually. So shout out to him there, because not a lot of channels do take research from my channel and don't give credit. So I do appreciate when people do that. But he did a recent video on the Scheunemann study, which was really good. Actually, he's been guilty of that one time, but we won't go into that. But this time he gave credit, and I really appreciate it. But he talked about the Scheunemann study, and he did a really good, he kind of attacked it from the perspective of the DNA tribes, the people who founded DNA tribes, and the fact that the founder, who basically uncovered that the ancient Egyptians had African DNA that aligned with West Africans, Southern Africans, Great Lake Africans at the highest, at the highest similarity. He died suddenly, and then his company was kind of like almost suddenly disbanded as well. It was very suspicious, almost one of those spooky conspiracy tales that you don't want to talk about too much. So shout out to Trill Black. If you haven't watched that, go to his channel and watch that. It's an excellent, as all of his stuff is, but it's a really excellent little bit of investigation. So I want to give him some props for that, definitely. But today's live stream, which we need to get into now, I'm just going to pull up the study and we're just going to go through it together. I'm going to do a bit of reading for you guys today. I'm going to have a bit of discussion. In the meantime, let me just quickly give a quick shout out to Angel again. He says, I think infantry reflected the native population. Absolutely did. Absolutely did. I know you're talking about the image. I might pull that up on the screen, actually, that image of the Egyptian infantry, because I think that's a really good, I should say Kemetic infantry, but I think you all know what I mean. I think that's a really good image to pull up. I like it because it's easy to search for as well. Let's type in statuettes of Egyptian infantry, and this absolutely is. I mean, why wouldn't it be the population? And this is what's beautiful about the images of the Egyptian infantry. Okay, we got two sets of images. Is that we get the upper Egyptians. Okay, so these are the upper Egyptians, or the southern Egyptians here. Let me just quickly pull up a big image, and we know they're the upper Egyptians because these are our Tarsetians, our people of the land of the bow. So let me just open this image in a new tab. Zoom out a bit. So these are our upper Egyptians, people of the land of the bow. And then we have our infantry, which I would say would make up maybe, or really anywhere in the population. Once again, what's beautiful about this, no, let's do that again. That didn't really seem to work. What's beautiful about this, open image in new tab. Here we go, that's better. Yeah, I was gonna say, what's beautiful about this image is that we get, or these images, that we get the two different complexions, both of which are black. I don't know how many of you have seen my live stream with when I had that debate with Meta, and I pulled up this image and I showed it to him, and he was like, yeah, this is like just like Saidi people. And I was like, Well, yeah, technically, I've met Saidi people, and uh, uh, they can definitely acquire that dark, deep, dark reddish brown that you see amongst Black Africans. But the hair, yeah, the hair here puts these people firmly within the African phenome. You know, the you know, you know what I mean when I say the African phenotype. Okay, these are just Africans. These people could exist anywhere south of modern day Egypt along the Nile, anywhere right up to and beyond the equator. So, you know, don't kid a kidder. Let's be honest about what we're seeing here. These aren't your typical. This isn't a good depiction of your typical Saidi men. This is just a typical depiction of Black Africans. As is this. These are just darker Black Africans. So having these two images actually is a very good way to have a discussion with the modern Egyptians. You know, they're not black. Look what they did to black people on the walls. Oh, you are the slaves. It's like they operate without any common sense or any rationality. It's like, yes, they do differentiate sometimes between darker skinned people and more medium dark skinned people, but they're all black. You know, just because these people exist, it doesn't suddenly make these people not black or white or Arab. Okay, these people existing doesn't make these people Arab. I'm gonna say that again. These people existing doesn't make these people Arab. Okay, I'm gonna say that one more time. These people existing doesn't make these people Arab. These are all black people. You can do what you want. You can you know, you can lobotomize yourself all you want to try and believe that this is not a depiction of an army of black people, but that's up to you. You know, we're not going to entertain such stupidity. So anyway, thank you for raising that, Angel. I think that's a good way to start. We need to get cracking now because this is going on for way too long, way too much preambling. I'm just going to find my links and then we'll get cracking. I need to do a search. My name's disappeared. Okay. Yeah, this is it. So what we're going to do today, well, like I said to you guys already, we're going to just dive into the Scheunemann study. Okay. And I've got a documentary on this channel. So I have covered this before. This isn't a new kind of like thing. I've tackled it on many separate occasions, but I thought I wanted to give it a little bit of a revisit because I was thinking about doing a kind of a video, but such as Sod's Law as well. Just when I was about to, you know, release something, Trill Black comes out of his excellent video, and someone just, and that happens all the time, by the way, when you do what we do, we just about to release something and someone that you know releases something that's really good, and then I go, I can't be bothered to do that anymore now. And that's happened with us so many times where I kind of message Trill Black and I'll be like, hey, I was about to do that subject, but now you've done it, I ain't gonna bother. And he'll be like, no, do it. And I'm like, nah, you did it well. It doesn't need two of us doing it. And sometimes it makes me lazy. But this one I wanted to do anyway, because I just wanted to comb through this with a fine-tooth comb, because you're going to reveal some stuff or find out some stuff about this joke of a study today that you possibly didn't know. So let's crack in. Let's get right into this, okay? So let's read the abstract together. We know the premise, and if you don't know the premise, you're going to learn about this study today. So just let me overview really quickly. So this study is called Ancient Egyptian Mummy Genome Suggesting an Increase of Sub-Saharan African Ancestry in Post-Roman Periods. Now this study, which had a very sizable team of, I don't want to say neo-Nazis, but I mean, if you look at the conclusions of the study, one does wonder, had a very sizable team of people who I hasten, you know, I struggle to call academics. And you can see they've, even in the title, they couldn't resist making it clear why they did this study. You know, genome suggests an increase of sub-Saharan Africa. Like, why would you feel that if sub-Saharans were not relevant to this study, why would you feel the need to mention them in the title? If they didn't have any sub-Saharan ancestry and then they just suddenly had an increase, that's the argument. Argument is that the ancient Egyptians, the people they call ancient Egyptians, had no black ancestry, but then there was an increase of sub-Saharan ancestry recently because of, guess what, slave trade. Even though they'll have no references for this, they're just kind of like slave trade because we said so, and that means modern Egyptians have more ancestry than the ancient Egyptians. Now, if sub-Saharans, as they called them here, or black Africans were that irrelevant, why do you even mention them in the title? Even the title is something that just screams racism, and these people cannot help it. You know, black people live rent-free in their mind. But anyway, let's crack on and let's go through, and you're going to realize how stupid and how poor this study is. It's a poor study. So Egypt, located on the Isthmus of Africa, is an ideal region to study historical population dynamics due to its geographic location and documented interactions with ancient civilizations in Africa, Asia, and Europe. So they're treating Egypt as this crossroads state, as they tend to do, and there was some truth in that. But let's see if they approach it honestly. And if we're going to be honest, actually, you know, up until the Ptolemaic period, we're really talking about these two regions. Europe doesn't really play a function. And even if you want to talk about the Mediterranean, there's another argument about, is the Mediterranean really even Europe? I think that's a conversation we need to start having. Because in my view, I don't think the Mediterranean is Europe. I think we should classify it as its own region because it had nothing to do with the rest of Europe. But that's another discussion. Particularly in the first millennium BCE, Egypt endured foreign domination, leading to growing numbers of foreigners living within its borders, possibly contributing genetically to the local population. So talking about from, you know, first millennium, so from 1000 BC, they're talking about the fact that they have growing numbers of foreigners. Guess where, or guess which time span this study dates back to? Yeah, you've guessed it, in and around the first millennium BCE. So they're already making it very, very clear that foreign people contribute to the population. So you're going to see how much they contradict themselves in this study, and they're not even like ashamed of the way they do it. Here we present 90 mitochondrial genomes. Now, you guys know mitochondrial genomes are the ones that you inherit from your mother. They're passed down maternally, so from mother to mother to mother to mother to mother, down a single line. Okay, so we're talking about single line or uniparental ancestry that's being analyzed here. Okay, so 90 mitochondrial genomes inherited from the woman, as well as genome-wide data sets from 3 individuals obtained from Egyptian mummies. Now, this part here, you have to be very careful for. So, because what do they mean when they say genome-wide data sets? What they actually mean is Y-DNA, which is your uniparental paternal lineage that's passed from father to father to father, mitochondrial DNA, and then a tiny, tiny, minuscule amount of nuclear DNA. It's genome wide, but it's far from whole genome. They get so little nuclear DNA, which is kind of like the DNA that sits in the autosomal region. They get so little nuclear DNA that it's almost not worth mentioning. It doesn't contribute anything for the study. So really, the big claim to fame here is we got Y-DNA. We managed to get Y-DNA from 3 individuals, as well as the mitochondrial DNA. And then all the other 90 individuals, all we managed to obtain, and when I say managed to obtain, I actually think it's all they published. I think they were able to get Y-DNA from far more individuals than that, but they didn't want to publish the results. They were hiding it. There's no way that they would have struggled that much. But anyway, we'll get into that. These samples recovered from Middle Egypt span around 1300 years of ancient Egyptian history, from the New Kingdom to the Roman period. Now, we know the Roman period starts at around, you know, the time of Christ, so to speak, yeah, and ends, you know, I think a couple hundred years later. And if it spans for 1300 years, then we're literally going from the first millennium to the Roman period. So that entire period that we're looking at is the time that they've already established that growing numbers of foreigners living within its borders, possibly contributing genetically to the local population. But they'll say that, but then they'll ignore it as they proclaim their title and they proclaim their agenda. Our analysis reveals that ancient Egyptians, so this is where they're already contradicting themselves. They're calling them ancient Egyptians, in spite of preambling the fact that they might not all be ancient Egyptians. And it gets worse. Shared more ancestry with now this is the guys with Near Easterners than present day Egyptians. So even before we get to, so this, remember this whole argument they like to talk about, oh, the Copts, oh, the Saidis. This study is like, yeah, screw the Copts. They share more ancestry with your modern Arab, okay, Syrians, Iranians. They were more Iranian than even present day Egyptians. Yeah, that's what this study says. So when you have the Egyptians, yeah, the E4E coming around, oh, this study says we have more sub-Saharan ancestry. You're not related, you Black African. This study says Iranians are more related to the ancient Egyptians than you are. Yeah, it says your modern day Near Easterner is more related to the ancient Egyptians than you are. So when they're spouting this study, they don't even realize they're even condemning themselves. That's what's hilarious about this. I don't know how many of them even bothered. Now, bear in mind, they're making this conclusion from, like I told you already, 90 mitochondrial genomes. So literally 90 uniparental maternal lineages and 3 Y-DNA lineages. Yeah, they haven't even got the genome-wide ancestries they got is so sparse. It shouldn't even really be considered. It's such a tiny amount, and let's look at the figures soon. And this is how ridiculous they are. But anyway, I'm going to carry on. Our analysis reveals that ancient Egyptians shared more ancestry with Near Easterners than present-day Egyptians, who received additional sub-Saharan admixture in more recent times. So they're basically saying the difference between Near Easterners and modern day Egyptians is the fact that modern day Egyptians have got more Black African ancestry in more recent times. Are they able to qualify this? No, it's just because we decided slavery. That's why we just decided it all came from the slaves. Yeah. This analysis establishes ancient Egyptian mummies as a genetic source to study ancient human history and offers the perspective of deciphering Egypt's past at a genome-wide level. And I've just told you, and the study itself reveals it's not really a genome-wide level. Okay, this isn't like STR analysis. Yeah, well, STR profiling. This is just, they just got a couple of uniparental lineages. This is as good as a kind of like an old school ancestry test, but without having any contemporaneous references to be able to put them in a population. It's the most asinine exercise you've ever come up with. And it's been thoroughly refuted on several levels as well. And we're going to go through some of those refutations. But let's get into some of the good stuff now, because this study really is a bit of a joke, okay? And I feel like I have to read some of it to you, but when we start getting into the sampling, that's when you're going to learn some stuff about this study that you maybe did not know before. Okay, I'm not going to read all of it. I'm going to try and get to the good bits, because blah, 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 blah. So over here, they're talking a bit more about the kind of foreign ancestry, which could have found its way in, the movement of people. And I have to state one thing as well. When it comes to these genomic studies, what you'll find is that the level of scrutiny and the level of rigor that they place into the historical narratives that they base their conclusions on are often very poor. So it seems like a lot of time they haven't consulted credible archaeologists and really good kind of credible historians. They just kind of get this basic GCSE level history that they plunk on their theories and upon their kind of samples to craft a story. And that's literally what they do. You'll find it's often very unimpressive in terms of what their drawing their conclusions from. Let's read from here, in fact. Until now, the study of Egypt's population history has largely been based on literary and archaeological sources and inferences drawn from genetic diversity in present-day Egyptians. Now, okay, both approaches have made crucial contributions to the debate. What debate, first of all? Okay, so that's already peculiar use of language there, clearly showing that they're obsessed with race here without actually saying it, but are not without limitations. On the one hand, the interpretation of literary and archaeological sources is often complicated by selective representation and preservation, and the fact that markers of foreign identity, such as, for example, Greek or Latin names and ethnics, quickly became status symbols and were adopted by natives and foreigners alike. Now, this is largely unsupported. Okay, this is largely unsupported. That's an assumption. We don't know, because really what they're talking about here is they're talking about the Hellenic era, okay? And the assumption that has been made that a lot of those people were Hellenic converts. The problem with this is manifold. Okay, I was going to say it's twofold, but it's not. It's manifold. The problem with this is that, first of all, ancient Egypt was seen as a high culture. For instance, the Ptolemaic dynasty completely submitted themselves to the ancient Egyptian religion and completely espoused all aspects of ancient Egyptian culture. Okay, they didn't come in to shake up and disturb the way the ancient Egyptians practiced their day-to-day lives. So they were coming in and they were practicing, as we know, the Ptolemaics and the Cleopatras, etc. They were practicing Egyptian religion. They were building Kemetic temples. They were doing everything, in line with the existing culture. So why then would Egyptians take on Greek names? That's working backwards to what's taking place here. Okay, there's no evidence that Egyptians took on Hellenic names. The people who were buried in Greek tombs in Greek cities with Greek names, Occam's razor says they were Greeks. Yeah, Occam's razor says that they were, Greek imports. They were Greek migrants. Yeah, we have the provenance for that. We have the evidence for the huge migration from the Aegean into ancient Egypt. We have an entire city, Alexandria, founded and established and populated by nothing. Well, I say nothing, but they brought some, Jews with them and other populations, but not populated by the locals, populated in its entirety by foreigners. Okay, so we have these things. So we don't need to try and make up the idea, status symbols were adopted by natives and foreigners alike. So you need to support that, which obviously they don't do. On the other hand, results obtained by modern genetic studies are based on extrapolations. And by the way, that's also an excuse for the fact that they know that they haven't got anybody who looks authentically Egyptian. So if we can already make the argument or start proposing the argument that, hey, guys, I know this looks really Greco-Roman right now. Yeah, I know this mummy looks really Greco-Roman and it has a Greco-Roman name and it's not mummified. It's just a cadaver. And because we know that a lot of the Greeks didn't actually mummify, they just were buried in an Egyptian way. Once again, another thing as well, they buried themselves in Egyptian way in the Egyptian coffins, but a lot of them didn't either know how to do or couldn't afford the mummification process, so they were unmummified. So they're doing all of that, but they're secretly Egyptians and they've changed their names to Greek names, which makes absolutely no sense. But anyway, results obtained by modern genetic studies are based on extrapolations from their modern data sets and make critical assumptions on population structure and time. The analysis of ancient DNA provides a crucial piece in the puzzle of Egypt's population history and can serve as an important corrective or supplement to inferences drawn from literary archaeology and modern DNA data. And it's important to note that they just kind of ignore the parts of the literary and archaeology that doesn't suit their biases. But anyway, let's carry on. Despite their potential to address research questions related to population migrations, genetic studies of ancient Egyptian mummies and skeletal material remain rare. Although research on Egyptian mummies helped to pioneer the field of ancient DNA research with the first reported retrieval of ancient human DNA. Since then, progress has been challenged by issues surrounding the authentication of the retrieved DNA and potential contaminations inherent to the direct PCR method. So they talk a little bit, and this is important here because they rejected a lot of the PCR results, and the question mark is why. I think the answer to that question is they didn't like what they were throwing up, and when it threw up stuff that looked too African, they were much more inclined to reject it than to accept it. It's much more easy to manipulate the results of a few uniparental lineages than it is to manipulate the results of correctly obtained DNA, for whole genome DNA, which is not what they were doing. Okay. So furthermore, the potential DNA preservation in Egyptian mummies was met with general skepticism. And we know about this hot Egyptian climate, blah, 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 blah. Now, this is where it gets important, because here you've got to see them telling on themselves a bit. Okay. It says the recent genetic analysis of King Tutankhamun's family is one of the latest controversial studies that gave rise to this extensive scholarly debate. Ooh, why was it controversial? Are we talking here about the DNA tribes results? Are we talking here about Ramesses III's E1B1A paternal lineage? Is that what we're talking about here? The fact that is that what makes it controversial, or was it controversial? Are you talking about the pathology? Are you talking purely about the fact that, you know, they are able to trace this person came from, you know, was carrying this diseases, you know, or are you talking about the ancestry? You know, this person gave birth to this person, etc., etc. We know who Tut's mum and grandma, and etc., etc. What do you mean by controversial? Have you noticed they're using these words like controversial and stuff quite frequently? It's almost like they're constantly telling on themselves, isn't it? It's almost like they're constantly kind of like exposing the fact that they have an agenda. They have a racial agenda here over and over again. Okay. New data obtained with high throughput sequencing methods have the potential to overcome the methodological and contamination issues surrounding the PCR method and can help settle the debate surrounding ancient Egyptian DNA preservation. Keep talking about the debate. Let's carry on. However, the first high throughput sequences obtained from ancient Egyptian mummies were not supported by rigorous authenticity and contamination tests. So you can see what they're doing here. They're essentially poo-pooing. Yeah, I'll use that phrase as a phrase that Chilbag likes to use. They're essentially poo-pooing the Amarna lineage results, the Amarna, Ramesside, Thutmose lineage results that clustered the ancient Egyptians with Africans. And they say, oh no, they weren't supported by rigorous authenticity and contamination tests. Now, this might be true, but this test certainly, or this DNA study certainly doesn't solve that problem. That's the issue. This study doesn't solve anything. And it's a bit of a joke. Let's carry on. Here we provide the first reliable data set obtained from ancient Egyptians using high throughput DNA. Guys, we did just read the fact that the entirety of the study really is based on 90 mitochondrial DNA sequences. We just read that, didn't we? 90 maternal uniparental lineages. And they're talking about it like they've done some breakthrough ancestry testing on random people. And when I say random people, guys, I promise you, you do not know how random this test was. You do not. If you think you know, I thought I knew. And then I read properly and I was like, why is no one talking about how terrible, how much of a joke this entire test is? Let's carry on. By directly studying ancient DNA from ancient Egyptians, we can test the hypothesis drawn from analyzing the modern Egyptian DNA, such as recent admixture from populations with sub-Saharan and non-African ancestries, attributed to trans-Saharan slave trade and Islamic expansion. Now, that's a huge assumption you're making there. That's a huge assumption you're making there. Modern Egyptians, if we're going to believe your perspective on this, have been living side by side with Black Egyptians for thousands of years, and yet you've attributed the existence of sub-Saharan DNA as being a result of trans-Saharan slave trade, like there was a force field blocking the Sudanese and the Kushites. And this is what I mean about these guys with their ridiculous, crappy analysis. Because if they just had even a moderate Egyptologist or an archaeologist, they would have turned around to them and said, oh, no, actually, the Kushites and even if you believe the ancient Egyptians weren't black, which is obviously what they believe, you can't deny the fact that they intermarried with the Kushites constantly. Okay, it's all over the historical record. You had many of them marrying into nobility, many Kushites marrying into nobility. You had many ancient Egyptians with Kushite names. Okay, so even if you don't believe the ancient Egyptians were black, which they were, the entire aspect of their interrelationship, their marrying into one another, their close relationship, their genetic ties is indisputable on a historical level. So if they bothered to do any kind of basic historical analysis, they'd realize that, you know, attributing sub-Saharan ancestry to trans-Saharan slave trade makes you an idiot. It just makes you an absolute idiot. But these people don't mind being idiots. They are idiotic, and the study's idiotic. On a more local scale, we aim to study changes and continuities in the genetic makeup of ancient inhabitants of Abusir El Meleq. Oh, really? Do you? Guys, please bear that in mind. Obviously, we know that this is the Abusir El Meleq study, and you've got to realize why I just gave you that really ironic voice in a moment, because this is just rubbish. This is literally just rubbish. Let's carry on. Since all sampled remains derived from this community in Middle Egypt. Oh, really? They're saying that with a lot of confidence, aren't they? You almost want to believe them, don't you? Okay. And have been radiocarbon dated to the late New Kingdom and Roman period. Okay. So this is how, so there's the date range that they've got, 426 CE to 1388 BCE. Now, someone do some quick maths for me, because this is when you start to realize these people aren't even that serious. Because if you do some quick maths, you'll quickly realize that that's 1800 years. Okay, that's over 1800 years, isn't it? What do they say at the start of this study? Should we just scroll back up to see if they can even be consistent with their own rules that they say? I think it says it here. The samples recovered from Middle Egypt span around 1300 years of ancient Egyptian history. 1300 years of ancient Egyptian history. 1388 to 426 CE. That's 1800 years. I mean, that's just basic mathematics. Yeah? You said the sampled remains derived from a community radiocarbon dated from the late New Kingdom to the Roman period. Okay? That's just basic maths. I mean, these guys are not serious. Okay? Let's carry on. In particular, we seek to determine if the inhabitants in this settlement were affected at a genetic level by foreign conquest. They don't seek to determine that at all. In fact, they don't even study or even talk about the fact that these people could be foreign. They just mention it here, especially during the Ptolemaic and Roman periods. No, even before then. Okay, basic Google research would have told you that that particular region of Abusir El Meleq had foreign occupation from as early as the Persians, the first Persian invasion. Okay, even dating back to, this was a favored region for foreigners. But that's an aside, because we're going to test this claim, guys. I want you to see quickly, just highlight this, because we'll test this claim. And this claim is here: Abusir El Meleq community, since all sampled remains derived from this community in Middle Egypt. We're going to test that claim. We're going to test it today, because you've got to realize their study doesn't even say that. Okay. Oh, sorry. And this is a map, and let's have a look at this map actually, because it's really important to note. So this is the Fayum. Okay. So this region here, this entire region is the Fayum. Okay. And those of you who will know that when the Greeks conquered Kemet, the Fayum became a Greek district. Okay. So the Fayum became a Greek district. I think it was Crocodipolis. Yes, I think it's called Crocodipolis. But this became a Greek district where they basically migrated most of their population in, along with a bunch of Jewish mercenaries to make up that population. Now, Abusir El Meleq, which is shown in the cross here, is a part of the wider Fayum district. This entire district is called the Fayum. You can see here, there's only a distance of like 10 kilometers between where this is, but this is just the center of the Fayum. But this entire district is a part of the Fayum. Okay, this is a foreign district. In fact, I could show you another resource that shows this in a good deal of detail. Give me 1 second, because this actually might be worthwhile. Just before we move on, if I can find that resource, think, where would it be? Yes, it'll be here. I'm just looking at something off screen. Give me 10 seconds, guys. And I should be able to pull this up. Boom, 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 boom. View large icons. Okay, that hasn't helped. This might be it. Yay, this is it. I found it. That was actually relatively painless. Normally trying to find stuff live is a painful experience that I do not want to rebuild. So let me just quickly pull this on the screen for you guys. If you let me. Yeah, here it is. So I just want to show you exactly where Abusir El Meleq is situated. If this actually starts loading. My Adobe is just moving super slow and it's really frustrating the hell out of me. Here we go. Okay, so I'm just going to zoom into this image so you guys can see it clearly. I'll pull it off the screen in a second. Okay, so these are the districts that all of the Fayum mummy portraits were found. Go away. Okay, brilliant. So I'm just going to scroll down. So you can see them here. So we've Arsinoe right at the center, Hawara, where many of them were found. You can see Abusir El Meleq here. Go away. Thank you. So you can see Abusir El Meleq here. I hope you can see it anyway. Okay. So this is the Fayum district. Okay. Oh, my goodness. Won't take no for an answer, will it? Okay. Abusir El Meleq there. All right, so this just gives you a nice little glimpse of all of the different districts where they find all the black dots. Wherever you see a black dot, that's where they found these various Fayum portraits. And as you can see, Abusir El Meleq was one of the homes for finding these, alongside many others. But all of these are part of this is the wider Fayum district where they found all of these Greek portraits, okay? These Greek portraits of Greek people in ancient Kemet, okay? These are Greeks. Let's close that down. Okay, that wasn't too painful. Quick shout out to Mario. Thank you very much for your $2. And she said, since 1950, Africa has had over 220 coups. Oh, wow. That's very political. Is that a warning for South Africa, or is that relevant to what we're talking about there? You kind of lost me a bit on that one, but I'm sure you'll let me know. Let's carry on. All right, so, sorry, let's pull that out. It's pulling out my headphones in the ear. Let's do my head in. Let's carry on. So, all 166 samples, because a lot of people think this study is a lot bigger than it is, and it's not. All 166 samples from 151 mummified individuals. No point in mentioning that, because that's nowhere near what the sample size was. The sample size in the end was 90 individuals, okay? 90 individuals who you only got mitochondrial DNA from, okay? Using this study were taken from 2 anthropological collections. Now, this is where it gets interesting, guys. I need you all to strap in here, yeah? Remember I talked about the provenance in this study, okay? So we've just looked at where the Fayum is. We've decided who the Fayumites were and the population of Abusir El Meleq. But now we're going to look at where these samples came from, guys. So I need you to just strap in, okay? Because this is going to get very interesting, okay? All 166 samples from 151 mummified individuals. Now, they're saying 151 mummified individuals. Yeah? Note that, please. For details of the 90 individuals included in this later analysis, see supplementary data 1. Okay, we will be seeing that. Okay, I'm just going to quickly click on that. All right, we will be seeing that, opening that up and coming back to that later. Okay, and by the way, it doesn't give you much, it just gives you the data, doesn't tell you any provenance, and there's a reason for that. Whoops. Have I lost my spot? I thought when I clicked back, it would take me back to the top of the study. That's really annoying. Sorry, let me scroll up. Okay, I think we're here. Yes, okay, cool. So used in this study were taken from 2, pay attention guys, anthropological collections, okay, taken from 2 anthropological collections at the University of Tübingen, I'm not saying that wrong, and Felix von Luschen skull collection. I'm going to read that again, guys, because I think you might have missed that. Because for those of you who are thinking, oh yeah, this study, the Abusir El Meleq study, they trampled down to Egypt, yeah, they went into the Fayum and they found these fresh cadavers, these fresh, no. Oh no, you've got that wrong. Okay, all of the samples were taken from 2 anthropological collections, University of Tübingen and the Felix von Luschen skull collection. Now, for those of you who think that's a typo, oh no, that's not a typo. It literally is a skull collection. A skull collection. Now, to be clear, these samples or these cadavers that they've been sampling were captured latest date 1909. So were taken from Egypt to Germany 120 years ago. I'm going to say that again, 1909. So before the discovery of the fake bust of Nefertiti, before the discovery of the reserve heads, yeah, but before the discovery of Tutankhamun, the Germans had hijacked, and I use the word hijack because in 1909, guess what didn't happen when they were excavating ancient Egyptian remains? This is the same time period that they were eating mummies. Okay, this might be why we have a skull collection, because they might have eaten all of the mummified soft tissue. This study is based on random scraps that they've collected from this university and this skull collection, and the only provenance they have is the fact that these universities and this skull collection has labeled them correctly, because no one was committing any kind of fraud back then. No one in Germany was pretending they'd collected a load of samples from Egypt and they'd actually got it from somewhere else, because Egyptian mummies weren't more valuable than other collections. This is a local study, guys. They didn't even, I don't even think they even went to Egypt for this study. Now, guys, I know this might not be news to you, yeah, but that's news to me. I always thought this study was like, oh, you know, they got the whole no, this is just a bunch of freaking scientists from Germany going to their local thing. Is that from, where's that from? Egypt. Well, we wanted that to be part of our test. These was collected in 1909, guys. There was no provenance. They had no provenance notes. A lot of these skulls just like, oh, I think that one's Egyptian. How do they know they're all from Abusir El Meleq? What is the chance that these 2 separate collections, yeah, all came from exactly the same tomb? And how do you know that? This is the kind of quackery that we're dealing with here. The skulls can literally be from anywhere. Let's carry on. Which is now kept at the Museum of Prehistory in the Staatliche Museum Berlin, blah, blah, blah. Individuals, S3, so they're given the names of the individuals. And then all of the dating is being done by radiocarbon dating. All of it. So the only reason they're able to know if someone's from this pit, there's no provenance attached. Like I said, there's no investigation of the mummy, the style of the coffin, this, that, and the other. They just radiocarbon date it. And it's like, yep, this is from this period, 100% radiocarbon dating for them to come up with these assumptions. Okay. According to the radiocarbon dates, the samples can be grouped into 3 time periods: pre-Ptolemaic, New Kingdom, Third Intermediary Period, and Late Period, Ptolemaic and Roman period. During their conservation in the Tübingen and Berlin collections, so now they're calling it the Berlin collections. Can we just call it the skull collection? Yeah, this is literally a skull. It's not a mummy. And bear in mind what I said here: 151 mummified individuals. That already is a lie, because you've just told us that many of the individuals you got from a freaking skull collection. So why are you using the word mummies? These aren't mummies. By the way, guys, just to let you all know as well, for those of you who perhaps aren't aware, a majority of the I'm going to go back to this. Oh, I closed it down. Cast your mind back to the image I just had on the screen of the Fayum complex. A majority of the bodies, I'm going to say bodies, found in the Fayum complex are not mummified. So pretty much almost 100% of the mummies, the bodies with the Fayum portraits, and this is one of the big reasons why I think a lot of the Fayum portraits are faked, aren't mummified. And you have to understand, unmummified bodies, cadavers, yeah, just rotting inside a box, are of no value. Okay, you can't sell those. This is one of the big reasons why I posited that, given how hurriedly they were found and massive clusters they were found in, and the fact that there was no and they were all sold on the black market, and that's how they've all appeared in our museums today. The Fayum portraits were just an entire rouse to give value to essentially some coffins that would have been valueless. There would have been no value to those coffins, but if you stick a portrait on top, yeah, these repeating portraits that look exactly the same. If those of you think I'm just rambling right now, I've done a documentary on it. I advise you to watch it. If you stick portraits on top of these rotten carcasses, or these essentially skeletons, now you have something of value. Hey, look, this is ancient Egyptian. Look at these mummy portraits, but the mummy portraits make no sense. A lot of time the portraits are older than the people inside the coffins, which makes no sense. There's no way you can rationalize it. They have different phenotypes. It's just clearly been a portrait guessing game, and then they stick the portrait on the top and they hope for the best. These aren't mummies. So I think that it's very unlikely we had maybe a handful of actual mummified individuals in this study. The skulls we know aren't mummified, but I also suggest that many of the Tübingen samples are also not mummified, because they're from the Fayum district, and many of the Fayumites are just not mummified. Okay, so this is, you kind of give it, and this is the thing, they're not mentioning that. So it says look here. So during the conservation in Tübingen and Berlin collections, the remains underwent different treatments. So this is them telling on themselves. Okay, they had different treatments. Some were preserved in their original mummified state. Were they? It would be nice if you provided a picture. While others were macerated for anthropological analysis due to conservation problems. Some were just skulls, mate. Yeah. This is them trying to use fancy language. Oh, some were macerated. They're skulls. Yeah, they're skulls. Yeah, we don't know how many. And by the way, they're not transparent about how many they got from which and that and the other. They're not transparent about any of that. They're much more concerned with placing their own labels on this, which is just absolutely ridiculous, In most cases, non-macerated mummy heads still have much of their soft tissue preserved. Some of the remains individuals analyzed, some of the remains individuals analyzed in our study, this one, so 5 individuals have traces of gold leaf near the mouth and the cheekbone, which is characteristic for mummies from the Ptolemaic period onwards. In most cases, the brain was removed and the exacerbation route was highly likely transnasal. So they're talking about transnasal craniotomy, when they remove the brain through the nose, and they normally break the nose bridge in order to be able to do that, resulting in visible defects on the cribriform plate for the individuals analyzed in our study. In summary, the excellent bone preservation and the more or less good soft tissue preservation, so they are claiming that some of them have good soft tissue preservation, although I don't think they're being transparent about how many, made a wide-ranging analysis possible. And I'm also aware of this because they speak later in this study about the fact that they drilled, a lot of their success came from drilling into the tooth or drilling into the jawline of the skull in order to get the DNA. So I don't think they're being that transparent here. Recently, various studies were conducted on these remains, including a study on ancient Egyptian embalming resins, two ancient DNA studies, and an anthropological examination of the macerated crania. While the possibilities of a demographic reconstruction based on anthropological finds are naturally limited due to incompleteness of the assemblage, the following anthropological observations were made on the assemblage. For first assessment, CT scans of 30 mummies with soft tissue preservation were produced to describe sex, age at death, and the macroscopic health status. The 6 macerated mummies were examined directly. So there you go. There's 30 that they're claiming that they have enough soft tissue to be able to identify sex. It is notable that most of the individuals are early and late adults, and that subadult individuals are underrepresented. It is also possible that the sample's demographic profile is the result of different burial treatments for adults and subadults, but it seems more likely that it's due to collection bias, with collectors favoring intact skulls. Almost all of the teeth show significant dentine exposure up to a loss of the crown. The abrasion is highly likely due to food and food preparation itself, in particular for cereal-rich diet containing high proportion of coarse, sandy particles. These particles act to abrade the dental tissues, allowing bacteria to penetrate the interior of the teeth. As a result, carious lesions or periapical processes appear in the analyzed individuals. Forgive me, I have no idea what that word is. For the DNA analysis, we sampled different tissues, bone, soft tissue, tooth, macerated and non-macerated, to test for human DNA preservation. So we can see from that now, we're going to go into the numbers very, very briefly, and then we're going to move on to another study that does a very good job of just essentially stripping down this study for what it is, because this study really is just an exercise in kind of like selective data handling. Now, it says here, we extracted DNA from 151 mummified human remains and prepared double-stranded Illumina libraries with dual barcodes. Now, it's important to note there where it says Illumina libraries that we are dealing with genotyping arrays. We've spoken about this already, and these will be arrays that are trained on European populations. So it's already clear that there's the intention to filter these through these Eurocentric trained algorithms that get rid of signals that they're not really, that aren't African, but basically that are African, and only leave them with signals that are relevant to European populations. We get this all the time in ancient DNA studies. It's one of the biggest problems we have. And a lot of these teams that conduct these studies don't have any intention on addressing this introduced ascertainment bias, but it's one of the huge problems that we have. We use DNA capture techniques for human mitochondrial DNA and for 1.24 million genomic single nucleotide polymorphisms. Okay, now it's important to note here that that is, you know, that's around 5% of the human genome. So this is a massive amount of filtering that's taken place. But when you see how many they actually capture, you've got to realize how much of a joke that entire aspect of kind of like capturing autosomal DNA was. It wasn't successful at all. In combination with Illumina sequencing, through which we successfully obtained complete human mitochondrial DNA genomes from 90 samples and genome-wide SMP DNA data from 3 male individuals. Now, we already spoke about the fact that the genome wide really isn't genome wide. It's mitochondrial, it's Y, and it's a tiny amount of nuclear DNA. Now, I'm not going to go through read all this, but I do want to quickly just give you one more bit that I think is relevant, because it will get too technical and your brains will start to bleed. Not that you can't understand it. You probably understand it better than I do, but just for the fact that I'm not reading all of this. So yeah, so here it is. This is where I'm gonna read from. So 3 out of 40 samples, I'm reading from down here. 3 out of 40 samples fulfilling these criteria had acceptable nuclear contamination rates. So they speak about here about the contamination rates, and they talk about the number of samples that had acceptable contamination rates. 2 samples from the Ptolemaic periods, that's New Kingdom to late period, had 5.3% and 0.5% contamination and yielded, and these are the numbers I was talking about earlier, 132,000 and 500,000 SNPs. Now, bear in mind, you know, average human genome has 20 to 30 million SNPs. So this is, I mean, when we're talking about 132,000, we're already going to filter it down to 1.24 million. And we're now down to literally a tenth of that. This one's a little bit better in that it's up to a half. But then the third individual they have, the Ptolemaic period, they only have 200,000 SNPs. So we're dealing with a very scant amount of nuclear DNA to be able to make any kind of analysis. And this is one of the biggest problems or issues you have with this study. Okay. I'm going to, I could go on, but I'm going to leave it at that for now, because I think there's other people who've done a much better job at analyzing this. So we're going to quickly read through a few of those. But actually, before we get there, I'd like to share something with you all, guys, because I want to get as many people here as possible. So whilst I've got you all online, I'm going to share with you, having a brain block here. I can't remember the name of my website. Here we go. .com/. I'll share this link in the chat as well. Now, some of you will be aware, or many of you will not be aware, I have recently launched the TKM Members Academy. Okay, now this is a really exciting new space, a safe space that I've created for our community. And it's a way for you to support the channel, but also be rewarded for it. As such, if you're already a patron and you're one of my higher tier patrons, so that's from the nobility upwards, you will have free access to the Members Academy. I just need you to message me on the Patreon platform, and I can basically, you carry on with your Patreon membership, I'll transfer you and I'll manually set you up on the Members Academy. Now, I'm going to give you a very, very quick overview, and then we're going to get back to what we were doing. But the Members Academy is basically, like I said, it's a really good space where we're doing, it's almost hard to announce how much amazing new stuff we're doing. And the idea of this space is essentially to connect on a much deeper level. I'm in there pretty much every day. The members already who are there, and it's not like loads of them, but the members that are there at the moment are there pretty much every day. We have semi-regular, but they'll be down to at least weekly. So they happen kind of like calls. So those are live calls between all of the members of the group. Okay. We upload lecture plans and lesson plans. So those of you who like to teach African history, we have excellent networking opportunities. In fact, I'm just going to kind of read through some of the really cool things. Now I'm just going to read through this for you. So the TKM Membership Academy connects and rewards supporters of TKM with a safe space and contains everything a community needs to learn, grow, plan, and prosper. So I have been talking about for ages the fact that I really wanted to update the entire membership. I felt like I love the fact that you guys like to support me, and I've got fantastic supporters on YouTube. You guys don't need to jump ship or change or anything. Please don't withdraw your support. It's very much needed and appreciated. And I've got fantastic patrons, but I also felt like I wanted to offer the kind of membership community that really allows the channel to scale, but also where I'm giving something back so people feel like they're getting value for their membership. So if you did want to transfer over to the Membership Academy, you get a little bit more bang for your buck. Yeah, and that's really the most I can say on that. But obviously it's slightly more expensive than the YouTube memberships. So if you're YouTube and you want to just keep it in your YouTube membership, that's absolutely fine, and obviously very much appreciated. Members get to customize future content, learn to teach from our professional curriculum, and live training crafted by TKM. There's also an area where I allow members to upload lectures. So one of the things is we provide lectures, we provide full lecture plans. If you express an interest in that, we can send you the slideshow, and then you get to basically train yourself to be a teacher by uploading your lesson. Yeah, so you can record your lesson, you can upload it. That is a VIP perk, by the way, but I will then upload that to the site, and then you can get feedback from the channel, obviously feedback from myself, on how you can improve your delivery, and essentially train yourself to either teaching communities, stuff like that. So it's really cool. I want to take a lot of the effort and the weight out of people being able to teach Black history and African history, okay, by providing the resources, providing everything you need to be able to start your own initiatives. Because this, for me, is what my channel's about. This, for me, is what I'm about. I'm about us taking, you guys know me already, I'm about us taking ownership of our own institutions. And this is my way of being able to do this. So I'm just going to quickly go through a few of the perks with you. Okay, so you get a historical framework that I've created. You get, oh yeah, another feature that you get as well is custom research topics. So if you're a part of the Members Academy of a certain tier, you can basically make a content request. And I know loads of you like email me all the time, kind of like, have a look into this. And you can, as you can imagine, guys, I got like I get hundreds of emails a day, and I can't respond to them all. But if you're a member or part of the Membership Academy, you can actually make a request, and I've got a certain amount of slots on a monthly basis where I will literally respond to your content request. I'll go out, I'll do the research, and I'll create a stitch, or I'll create something, and then I'll feed it back to you. Okay, and I'll post it as a short. So I'll either post it as a short, or I'll post it as a lecture on the channel, on the Membership Academy itself. Members only live streams and strategy calls with TKM. You get VIP seating and comments on the TKM live streams. Actually, we need to get that started, by the way. If you're a member of the TKM Academy, we're doing a live stream now. Remind me on the community area to get that sorted, so I can tell you what codes we'll be using for those members. And you get basically automatic highlights on, the membership live stream, sorry. We get lectures and contents. We get opportunity to join TKM museum tours and site visits. And also, a really exciting, I have to give you this announcement before I read out some of the very generous super chats I appreciate. I've created a full curriculum that is going to be available very soon. Currently contains 42 lessons. The goal is for it to contain 50 lessons. So that 50 lesson curriculum isn't just lesson plans, it's assessment criteria, it's assessments, it's a slideshow. It's basically a complete curriculum within a box. So that and it's also been crafted to Key Stage 4/Key Stage 5 standards. So I've done that obviously using my teaching experience. So it's a Key Stage 4/5 full curriculum. Now that will be for sale, the actual curriculum in a box, but the lesson plans themselves will all be available to members. So you can go through the lesson plans, you can use them. And if you decide, I actually want the entire curriculum, that will also be available as well. So there's just loads. And also it's just an amazing community. It's already forming into a amazing community. If you go there now and check it out, you will actually see how much interactions we're already having. I think a big goal of it is to create a network. And my goal really is, it's always been my vision for the TKM to be a full media network where we have complete control of what we teach, of what's, and this is one of the reasons why I launched the TKM Nutshell the other day. That's the TKM Bite Size Education channel, which is a different style but reaches a different audience. My aim is for us to be able to really reach every area of our demographic with our history, with our message, and with a place where we can strategize. So it's just, I'm very excited about, as you can probably can hear in my voice. So this is what the TKM Media Network is looking at the moment. We've got TKM, which is the channel that you're on at the moment. We've got tkmedu.com, which is fastly becoming a very authoritative website. We've got Down with the King, which does the podcasts. We've got TKM Bite Size Education, which is brand new, but I think will grow very fast. We've got TKM Education, which now is going to be producing full end-to-end curriculums for people to be able to teach. And we've got TKM Publishing with my book that is very much on the way. Probably about 85% complete writing now. I know it's taken a lot longer than I said it would, but it's nearly there, and I'm very, very happy with it. So, you know, this is what we're trying to build, and I appreciate you guys. But yeah, if you want to get involved, there is a discount. The membership fees at the moment are half price to what they will be at some point, but I don't know when I'm going to put the price up, but I'm just letting you know it is at a discount now. So please do join if what I've said sounds like the kind of place that you want to be. I need to give a massive shout out to two very generous donors. So first of all, shout out to Bernard. Go hard. He said, your suggestions that they're controversial suggestions are what's causing all the controversies will be taken as controversial. Keep them all number. I love the wordplay there. Thank you, Bernard. But it's true, though. It's true, isn't it? It's absolutely ridiculous, you know. And massive, massive shout out to Dolomite Tobias. I appreciate you, brother. That is a very generous donation of $153. What can I say? Thank you very much. Wildflower, who is a part of the Membership Academy, says, come and join us now. We want more members there. We don't want to just be lingering at the number we're currently at the moment. My vision is if we build this up to a big enough number, the entire movement is going to be unstoppable. And I look at so many kind of like, sorry for ranting a little bit on this, but I do look at these kind of like other networks, and I know a lot of them have got illicit money coming from elsewhere, but you know, it's like people will go out, these horrible people will go out and shoot black people or say the N-word or be some stupid far-right grifter, and they just raise support for their crap that they do so effortlessly, and it just really pees me off. And when I say that, I'm not saying that people not donating pees me off, but it pees me off that they're able to raise funds for being such wicked people so easily. And yeah, it just annoys me. I wish we could, if we could respond in kind to, and I'm not just talking about myself, but to people who we know in our community are building something. TKM is something this is my life. This is what I'm building. And people who you know, this is going to be something that's going to sow to our future. It'll be amazing. It'll be amazing. This is a great way for you to do it and to essentially be a part of it as well. Hold me accountable, have a conversation with me. I'm very accessible. Everyone in the group will tell you that. You can either DM me in the group or you can just pop a message in the community board. We're thinking of new things all the time. So one of the ones that we thought of was actually quite a new development, and it came during a live stream call, was the have I put it in here? I might not even put it in. That's how I knew it was. It was the see, I haven't put it in here. The thing that we thought of was the community lecture space where community members can upload lectures. And I thought, no, I want to support that. And this is why I uploaded 3 or 4 new lesson plans just today on the community area, so that anyone who wants to provide a lecture, who wants to produce a lecture and kind of like post it up, maybe start sowing towards becoming a community teacher, or even maybe doing this kind of a similar thing to what I do online. Hey, I want to give you the tools to be able to do that. But anyway, that's that. Let's move on now. Appreciate you. Thank you very much once again to the donors. And yeah, I hope to see you guys on the other side. Much love and appreciation for those really generous donations. Okay, let's jump back because I want to dive into something else now, which is gonna stay on this, but good question. Someone just asked, when did it start? I'm assuming you're asking about the membership academy. I did a soft launch just for current members. So those of you who are already YouTube members, like Mariel, or Patreon members will have already heard of the Members Academy. I did a soft launch just among members about a week and a half ago. Oh, the stream. The stream started at 10:30, so it's been going for just over an hour now. And I want to get into the next part of it. So let's, do I want to actually bring this up? Yeah, so this is, I'm going to bring up this quickly, okay, before we move on to the next area. I'm just going to kind of read this out. If you can't see this, you just have to take my word for it because it's a screenshot, and I have a feeling that actually, will let me zoom? Will let me zoom. Okay, and this is a rebuttal that came from Stuart Tyson Smith. Will it let me drag up and down? It will. Great. Okay. And this is called the military settlement of foreigners in Egypt. Okay. Egypt, as a powerful empire, frequently recruited foreign troops, especially during times of territorial expansion. One well-documented practice was granting land to mercenaries and auxiliaries as compensation for military service, the Fayum. Okay, to be clear. During the New Kingdom, especially, and by the way, I never mentioned this before, the Fayum was disused by the ancient Egyptians since their Hyksos period. So even by the time the Ptolemaics came, they never used that region. So the local population didn't use the Fayum region because essentially it was overrun. The tombs were overrun during the second intermediary period when the Hyksos invaded. And since that time, then it literally fell into disrepair. So any of the tombs that they found, even the pre-Ptolemaic ones, if they're not dated to the Middle Kingdom, then we can assume there's a high likelihood, it's not a certainty, but a high likelihood they're going to be foreigners. But anyway, let's carry on. During the New Kingdom, especially under rulers like Ramesses II, Egypt employed various foreign groups, including the Sherden, a subset of sea peoples, Libyans and Asiatic soldiers, offering them estates in return for their loyalty. This practice is well attested in historical sources. For instance, the Anastasi Papyrus, dated the 13th century BCE, a military text describes Egyptian officers recruiting mercenaries from Syria and Libya, rewarding them with provisions and land. Similarly, the Greek Karnak inscription of Pharaoh Meneptah, or Meremptah, however you pronounce it, details how he settled defeated Libyans in Egyptian territories. Okay, so he's talking about the fact that he's recapturing non-Egyptians, okay, Libyans, inside what is Kemetic territory, integrating them into the state. These documented accounts of foreign mercenaries receiving land, provide a compelling explanation for why Scheunemann et al.'s mummy sample drawn from the Fayum showed elevated Middle Eastern affinities. Now, this is something that could be the case, or could also be the case that these mummies that were excavated in 1909 didn't even come from the Fayum. That's another very big possibility, given how much of a rogue enterprise Egyptology was during that date. Cross-cultural comparisons, the broader tradition of military land rewards. Egypt was not alone in integrating foreign warriors into its society through land grants. This practice spans cultures and continents, illustrating a common pattern in state formation and military strategy. Let's go on, because I want to move on to another one now as well. And this one you'll be familiar with. This is the study by Jean-Philippe Jourdain, where we look at the STR profiling of the New Kingdom lineage again. But I want to, this time round, focus on his actual rebuttals, because I think they're really solid and I think they're worth us reading. So let me just quickly copy and paste that in. Whilst that's happening, let me give a quick shout out to Naya. Thank you very much, Naya, for your $20. Said, hello fam, late to the stream, my apologies, hope everyone's doing well. We're doing very well. Thank you very much for your gift. If you're just joining, please run along if you can, or if you don't mind, and check out the link I left above. I'm going to put it in the chat again. So it's www.tkmedu.com. I hope this comes up as a link /academy. I was just plugging the new academy. Does that work as a link? Yeah, it does. No, it doesn't. I should have just done this. But it's the new TKM Members Academy area. Your presence will be very, very much welcomed. We'd love to have some more people join. Okay. Sorry, where was I? Thank you very much, by the way, for your $20 donation. That's very, very kind of you. Okay, now let me just quickly read. So let's have a read of this, because this is a really brilliant rebuttal to the Scheunemann study. So let's read through this together, because he raises several points. He conveniently separates them point by point, which makes it a very, very easy study to read through. So Schuenemann and all seemingly, or one I should say, seemingly suggest, based largely on the results of ancient DNA study of later period remains from northern Egypt, that the ancient Egyptians, and this is the thing, they keep making that phrase, which is very incorrect. They could say samples found in ancient Egypt, but they make it clear that they want, by saying ancient Egyptians over and over again, what they were doing was they were making a headline that they desperately wanted the media to repeat. Ancient Egyptians, they didn't say samples found in ancient Egypt. They didn't say late stage, Egyptians. They didn't say, people with high likelihood to be foreigners, or a tomb found in ancient Egypt. The headline over and over again was ancient Egyptians, even though all of the surrounding information, all of the archaeology, all of the provenance suggests that these people absolutely were not ancient Egyptians, but they don't care. All they care about is the headline. So that the ancient Egyptians as an entity came from Asia, the Near East, and that modern Egyptians received, well, more so than modern Egyptians, by the way, and modern Egyptians received additional sub-Saharan African admixtures in recent times after the latest period of the Pharaonic era due to trans-Saharan slave trade and Islamic expansions, all unqualified assumptions. In spite of the implied generalization about origins, the authors do not offer the caveat that their findings may have been different if the samples had been used from southern Egypt. And this is significant admission. And they're not even just southern Egypt. How about just an indigenous Egyptian nome, or Sapat, that hadn't been overrun by foreigners? Yeah, that would have been quite useful. Their conclusions deserve further discussion from multiple perspectives, which cannot be fully developed due to space limitations. There are alternative interpretations of the results, but which were not presented as is traditionally done, with the exception of the admission that the results from southern Egyptians may have been different. So they do caveat that, oh, well, if we had tested like one sentence, which they know is never going to get picked up by the media, because that's what they're doing. They're deceiving people. The alternative interpretations involve three major considerations. One, sampling methodology. Two, historiography, which is a big issue, which is one thing that I've been like highlighting. I'm not schooled enough, or definitely educated enough in genetics, to be able to question their sampling and methodology, although I will question the fact that they use Eurocentric genotyping arrays. Historiography is one thing that I have been questioning and I will continue to question, and the definitions as they relate to populations, origins, and evolution. Let me give a quick shout out to James, appreciate you. Says nowhere else in the world do they claim that there would be a racial difference between ancient peoples as physically and as culturally close as the ancient Egyptians and the people of Nubia. Absolutely. In fact, I would actually go one step further and say you will struggle if you go throughout ancient history to find two populations as closely associated as ancient Egypt and Ethiopia, not even just Nubia, and Ethiopia itself, Kush. I'm talking about here, ancient Ethiopia. Okay, they're constantly associated by all of the surrounding nations. It's always Kush and Kemet, or Ethiopia and the Egyptians, or the Ethiopians and the Egyptians. Constantly. They speak the same language. They look the same. They dress the same. They have the same culture. You don't see that anywhere in the ancient world. Two populations that are that closely tied together. But you're modern Egypt. Oh, they make you a slave. Oh, they make you a slave. You just Egypt slave. Okay, well, what were the Asiatics then? Respectfully, because you were enslaved. Asiatics were enslaved just as much, if not more, in ancient Egypt, in terms of, like, when I say enslaved, I mean like captured as prisoners of war, because the enslavement thing is just a fabrication. But you also have the addition that you have that there, even back then, the Asiatics have no cultural consistency with the ancient Egyptians, and yet the ancient Egyptians have complete cultural consistency with the Kushites. Everything they do is culturally consistent with the Kushites. So yeah, that's a very good point, James. Thank you very much for your $10 donation. Much appreciated. So let's read some of these rebuttals, because they really just do the job, to be honest with you. So I think this is translated from French, actually, if I remember correctly. But let's read it together. So, Scheunemann and Krause seemingly suggest, largely based on results of an ancient DNA study. I think I've read this already. Blah 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 blah. Yep. That's the same as the abstract at the top. So let's go from here. Okay, there are alternative interpretations of the results. Blah 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 blah. I read that already. The alternative. Okay, so we've read all that. So all of that we've already read. So let's just jump straight in. Okay, so sampling and methodological strategy. The samples can be questioned as to their representativeness of Egypt. And bear in mind, we're only saying this because they constantly refer to these samples as ancient Egyptians. Even though their actual anthropological data contradicts that, they continually refer to them as ancient Egyptians. Okay, so we've got to question their representativeness of their samples in terms of size, spatial, temporal, and socio-cultural aspects. All of the samples are taken from the northern half of Egypt, from one nome, which is 2.4%, or 142 of A nomes. Ancient Egyptian culture originated southern Upper Egypt. And I will just add to that point once again, the foreignness of this nome is very, very well known, certainly not a secret. The socio-cultural dynamics are not fully considered. The information on the origin and social status is incomplete or unknowable, in fact. Okay, so I'm going to read that again. The information origin and social status is incomplete or unknowable, in fact. This is what I was just talking to you about in terms of the provenance. The mummies are clearly assumed to be representative of the local population based on an incomplete archaeological report, incomplete being largely non-existent. These are skull samples and mummy samples from the University of Scheunemann, or whatever it was, and the skull samples from a skull collection. Okay, this is not the kind of provenance where you would say with so much confidence these are from Abusir El Meleq. It's kind of like, well, we can assume that these are Egyptian, and we think most of them are Egyptian, but we're not entirely sure. Okay, given that they were excavated in 1909. All right, anyway, let's carry on. In spite of the historical information provided about northern Egypt's interaction with the Near East since the pre-dynastic and the known settlements of the Greeks and others in northern Egypt in later periods. So there's obviously the added fact that there's so much foreign ancestry. And it's not to say, even to say northern Egypt would have been fair, but we could just really boil this down to the Fayum for being a uniquely foreign region of ancient Kemet, uniquely foreign. Okay. The timeline is not representative of ancient Egyptian history. 3,000 years is missing, obviously. So we have a timeline. It's restricted, as we know, from the very, very, very tail end of the New Kingdom to the end of the Roman era. Okay, that 1800-year span is almost entirely foreign, apart from a handful of years. Okay, that's almost an entirely foreign period of rulership in ancient Kemet. The samples cannot be convincingly said to represent true breeding populations or those that truly integrate historical information. Where would you get the truest or the purest Kemetic ancestry from? Particularly during the Hellenic era, you get it from the South, because the South was the least integrated. Do they want to get DNA from the South? Absolutely not. You know? The samples cannot be... Okay, I've read that. The authors use Bayesian reconstruction of population size changes through time with beast, for which there is generally a discrepancy between the marginal prior and the original prior distribution. The available information on the comparison between the original and marginal priors and on prior and posterior distributions does not take into account possible population substructure. I'm not gonna lie, that goes over my head. I'm not so familiar with that area of study. I'm sure some of you will be able to correct or at least school me up in the comments about what that means. Next, sex bias sampling. I talked about this before. Mitochondrial DNA cannot recover population demography of the whole country unless the sample size is large enough and representative in terms of chronology, regional variation, ethnicities, including the foreign presence, class, and geography. So in short, getting DNA from just single line uniparental female lineage or maternal lineage is only going to tell you one story. And for a nation like ancient Kemet, you're really, by focusing on mitochondrial DNA, you're going to get the most foreign genetic material available. Now, why is that the case? That's because it was very much a practice to marry in, to form allegiances with surrounding foreign nations by marrying in, like we see with the Mitanni princess that was married by Akhenaten, and I think by his father Amenhotep III as well. You see those kinds of practices very, very, very common in ancient Kemet. So you'll have loads of foreign women. They loved foreign women in Egypt, okay, particularly amongst the nobility. So you're going to get a single type of story or tale that comes from the mitochondrial DNA, and they're very aware of this. And I think this is why also they obscured or they hid the Y-DNA results, because we have so few. How can you get 90 mitochondrial but only 3 Y-DNA lineages? It's very, very suspicious. It suffers from many biases that can affect the assessment of the effective population size changes, mutation bias, and natural selection. The whole genome sample size is too small. We spoke about this already. 3. They only managed to get 3 whole genomes. And when we say whole genomes, we mean it very speculatively, because, like I said, the nuclear DNA that they got has so few SNPs, you shouldn't really even call it whole genome. It's just, we got a little bit from the autosomal, we got Y, and we got mitochondrial. It's not really whole genome. But anyway, to actually permit a discussion of all Egyptian population history from north to south, and that's how they present it. Okay. Historiography and misrepresentation. These are some of my biggest issues now. The authors do not consider explanations based on historical narrative, although they present historical information. And this is the thing. So you saw throughout the introduction, they're presenting this historical information. They're talking about the interchange, the foreign nature, the settling that's taken place within the time period. They present the data, but then they don't do any matching of the data that they presented with how it may have affected their results. They just say it, and then in their conclusion, they entirely ignore it. It's the most disingenuous and bad faith exercise that you could ask for. This is why this study is trash. Okay. Near East input in ancient Egypt could also be explained by old mercantile relationships with Lower Egypt, Madibuto complex, 4000 BC, Egyptianized Asiatic rulers and migrants, Hyksos, which I mentioned earlier, Near Eastern prisoners of war, which were numerous, more numerous than any other district that they are at war against. There was always Near Easterns that they constantly had depicted as prisoners. From Thutmose III's military campaign in the Near East, 1490 BC, from diplomatic marriages, which I mentioned earlier, Amenhotep III and the Mitanni princesses, Gulikipa in 1380 BC. So you have all of these reasons why ancestry or foreign ancestry could make its way into a discussion, particularly in a certain region. The authors completely dismissed the results of PCR methods used on ancient Egyptian remains. As Habicht et al. States, PCR methods were used successfully on mummified Egyptian cats and crocodiles without creating extensive debate. Results that are likely reliable from the studies that analyze short tandem repeats from Amarna royal mummies. And this is what they tried to poo-poo earlier, isn't it? This is what they tried to say, oh, these earlier things were no good. The rubbish results. It's kind of like, well, they may well have been more accurate than your own, even though you're trying to rubbish them. Ramesses III had the Y chromosome haplogroup E1B1A, old African lineage. Our analysis of STRs from Amarna and Ramesside mummies with Popophilia based on the same published data indicates 41 to 94%. That 94%, by the way, on 93.9 is Tutankhamun himself. Probability of sub-Saharan African affinities. Most of the individuals had a greater probability of affiliation with sub-Saharan Africa, which is not the only way to be African, a point worth repeating. I'm so glad he said that. So not only did, as we know, he run his test and it come out that the entire Thutmoside, Ramesside, Amarna lineage came out exponentially more African than Near Eastern or Asian, exponentially more, yeah, far more in terms of probability. He also pointed out that sub-Saharan African, by the way, that's modern sub-Saharan African, is not the only way to be African, because there are many groups, Black African groups like the ancient Egyptians, that were not south of the Sahara in ancient times, just like they are in modern times, where you have Black populations all across North Africa who are as silent, often silenced as populations, and often highly persecuted, but it doesn't stop them from being indigenous to those regions. Let's carry on. There are some philosophical issues as well for which space does not permit a full discussion. Conceptually, what genetic markers are considered to be African or Asian needs discussion. And I think this is a very important part. So I really would like everyone to take away what's being said here. I'm going to read that again. What genetic markers are considered to be African or Asian needs discussion, and of what defines Africa as well. Now listen to this next part, because this is really important. For example, the E1B1B M35/78 lineage found in one Abusir El Meleq sample is found not only in Northern Africa, but is also well represented in Eastern Africa, which is never mentioned. They always call it a North African DNA, Y DNA lineage, and perhaps was taken to Europe across the Mediterranean before the Holocene. So he's arguing here for an East African origin, which would make sense. And this is how bias in DNA sampling works, because they see a majority of a certain sample in a certain region. They say it originated there. And as I've said before, Africa tends to be penalized for its genetic diversity. Africans are far more heterozygous. We are far more genetically varied than our non-African counterparts. There's much more genetic variety going on the African continent. So it's very hard to find dominant, strongly dominant Y haplotype lineages or mitochondrial lineages. What you'll find is there's a few, but then there's loads of little ones scattered about, and everyone will say, oh, that's all foreign introgression. It's kind of like, no, it could have originated here. It's just that we've got so much variance that it's very hard for a single one to find dominance. So I'm very glad he's picked up on that anyway, or he's mentioning that. Alien lineages are found in high frequency, more than 70% among living Egyptians in Idama. The authors define all mitochondrial M1 haplogroups as Asian, which is problematic. Gene history is not population history. Ultimate origins and later sources to a specific region / population are conceptually different. Okay, particularly if we do not have a large amount of contemporary or DNA that is contemporaneous to a certain period in time for comparison. We can't look at modern frequencies which aren't very, by the way, Africa's very undersampled anyway, but we can't look at modern frequencies and then extrapolate back into history. It doesn't work that way. You have to be able to have a substantial amount of ancient samples to compare with to be able to know if something was present in a region or maybe sits indigenous to that region. Gene history is not also ethnic or linguistic history. M1 has been postulated to have emerged in Africa, and there is no convincing evidence supporting an M1 ancestor in Asia. Many M1 daughter haplogroups, M1A, are clearly African in origin and history. This guy is spitting some facts. You need to be listening here. Because these people who like to give you these phylogenetic trees and think, oh, this is now written in and it's official. It's kind of like, no, it's not. You need to chill the hell out. Okay, chill the hell out. You don't understand how this works. The M1A, the M1A1, M1A2A, and blah 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 variants found in Abusir El Meleq samples predate Islam and are abundant in sub-Saharan African groups, particularly in East Africa. Furthermore, sub-Saharan African groups indicated to have contributed to modern Egypt do not match the Muslim trade routes that have been well documented, as sub-Saharan African groups from Great Lakes and Southern African regions were largely absent in the internal trading routes that went north to Egypt. It is important to note that sub-Saharan African influence may not be due to a slave trade. And I said this in my documentary. If you guys remember, cast your mind back 3 years ago now when I did my documentary called The Great DNA Hoax. I spoke about the fact that amount of sub-Saharan African ancestry held by modern Egyptians, which gives many modern Egyptians very lovely African features, by the way, and beautiful African leaning hair. You know, they got much larger cars and much, I'm gonna sound very biased here, but much more attractive features than people north of them because of that African admixture, which might be a callback to a more ancient ancestry. Okay, a more native ancestry, the black ancestry. Okay, even if it's in a small trace amount, it might be a callback to that. But many of them deride it. Oh, slave, it's slave ancestry. It's like, okay, you want to rob yourself of of that connection to Kemet, go ahead. An overdone explanation. The Green Sahara is to be considered as Egypt is actually in the Eastern Sahara. Sub-Saharan affinities of modern Egyptians from Abusir El Meleq might be attributed to ancient early settlers, as there is a notable frequency of the Bushman canine deemed a sub-Saharan African trait in pre-dynastic samples dating 4000 BC from Idama, Upper Egypt. Okay, so spitting some serious facts there. Let me give a quick shout out to is that right? Okay, now I've got missing two. What's going on here? I've updated. Okay, just taking a while to update. Shout out to you, Blood of the Unicorns. Thank you very much for your $10. Says the mutation of light skin only existed 3,000 to 5,000 years ago. If that is correct, how can anyone say that population north of the Sahara are not black? Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, they'll keep changing that date. And the thing about a lot of these geneticists is and this is what he's actually highlighting here, is that they'll know one thing. Okay, a lot of these and anthropologists are exactly the same. They'll know one thing. So on the one hand, they'll concede that, oh, we have discovered that this population of Europe were all dark skinned. But then when they do their study and they create their reconstructions, they make them all white and they'll just give them a slight tan. They're like, that's not what your results said. Do you remember when we looked at the Neurottman study? And Neurottman study basically said he had his skin was somewhere between 5 and 6 on the Fitzpatrick scale. Yeah, which is basically just black. You're somewhere between bliggity black, somewhere between those two Egyptians statuettes that I showed you earlier. Somewhere between, jet black and, brownie black. Yeah, that's where Neurottman's actual, when you ran him through the high-risk plexus, DNA actually clustered with. It didn't stop them from doing some lightish skinned reconstruction because they don't care about the truth. They don't care about even their own science. What they care about is purporting some kind of a propaganda and making sure that black people don't have a history. This is the biggest driver for a lot of these people. But yeah, thank you very much for that donation. It's on the money. Scheunemann and all seem to implicitly suggest that only sub-Saharan African equals Africa. And this is the reason why they bring up that phrase sub-Saharan Africa, is to create delineation. So if you call me or you call anyone with dark skin, black person with curly hair, sub-Saharan Africa, what you're doing is you're making it sound impossible that that person could be an ancient Egyptian. It's impossible. You're a sub-Saharan, like that's two different regions, Egypt, sub-Saharan Africa. So the phrase itself is restrictive and it's racist. Okay, it's a new terminology. It's not one that needs. It's one that they started to adopt in the 1980s when they were getting their ass whooped by Sheikh Anta Diop. Okay, they started creating this new terminology. It's like, okay, cool, we're losing this battle, guys. Which is exactly what this study is all about. And it's like, we're losing this battle, guys. Okay, these people clearly, like I said, all strands of anthropology are matching black people. So we need to do a multi-fronted attack while we cook up this new form of science to manipulate results and make it seem like we've got some relation to the ancient Egyptians. We're going to simultaneously call these people sub-Saharan Africans. And that way we can draw this line and they can never, ever claim any kind of relevance to the Mediterranean region, to North Africa, to Southern Europe, all places where they continually find our signals, continually find us anthropologically. And when they're there, we can just say, well, they were sub-Saharans in the region. Can you see how that works now? Now you don't have to explain anything because we don't have to prove that this person is, genetically sub-Saharan or anything, but we just, as soon as we know they're black, just like they do with Nubians in Egypt, sub-Saharan, you find one in Southern Europe, oh, it's a sub-Saharan, probably a slave. Sub-Saharan, it's just a way of geographically taking someone whose ancestry might very well be formed in the place that they were found and relocating them to a part of the world that they're comfortable with. That's how theft is done. It has to be noted too that in the Islamic armies that entered Egypt, there were a notable number of Eastern Africans. It's not clear why there's an emphasis on sub-Saharan when no Saharan or supra-Saharan population samples, empirical or modeled, are considered. Further, exactly. So he's talking about the fact that they only use the term sub-Saharan, but they never use the term Saharan, which is what you would use for Sudanese and Egyptian people, or supra-Saharan people from outside of the Sahara. Okay, so they don't talk about, Mediterraneans as super-Saharan. So they only have sub-Saharan. So it's a way of, like I said, delineating, but then they don't want to geographically restrict any of the other populations they speak about. Furthermore, there's no one way to be sub-Saharan. Yeah, there's only one way. Well, there is in their view, because it could be black. It doesn't matter where you're from. It's like Andam. What do they do with Andaman Islanders? Oh, sub-Saharans. Look, they look like sub-Saharan, but they're not. They're from there, just like all these other black people who you're trying to restrict to Africa. Anyway, in this study, Northern tropical Africans, such as Lower and Upper Nubians and adjacent Southern Egyptians and Saharans, were not included as comparison groups as noted by the authors themselves. So when they run their comparison like they normally do, they were looking for the true Negro, okay? And anybody who they know is going to cluster closer than anyone, i.e. actual black Egyptians, who they normally rely on when they're trying to get their biological or genetic sampling. Let's sample some black Egyptians, but then just call them Egyptian and no one will notice the difference. It's one of the sly moves they like to pull. Just like these Egyptians do when they would say, oh, look, we did look like the pharaohs. And then they pull out a picture of a pure-blooded Nubian or mixed Nubian. And they're like, look, we do look like the pharaohs. Like, well, why? Don't be begging Nubian now, man. After all that racism, you want to beg Nubian now? The Paleolithic past has to be distinguished from the biocultural emergence in the Holocene of any society, including Europe. Egypt, long before the pyramids, was culturally and linguistically African, as evidenced by numerous studies, something we talk about constantly. And I would say throughout the dynastic era as well. But anyway, let's carry on. Based on standard research, which accept Egypt's place in the Nile corridor as having local origins, the symbolism found in the Badarian or Nagadan graves, etc., nor the pyramids were brought from Asia, i.e. the Near East. Everything was from either the south or from right there in Kemet. Nothing was ever brought from Asia. And I'll add to that the cattle domestication. All of it came from Africa. Either came from the Nilo-Saharan region, the Green Sahara, from Kush, but it's always coming from Africa, never from anywhere else. The Egyptian Neolithic cannot be shown as an entity to have come from Asia, although some domesticates were borrowed on local terms into a system of indigenous foraging in the Fayum. The only thing I can think of is the camel. I can't think of anything else. And that wasn't even really used until like the New Kingdom, from my understanding. Historical linguistics shows ancient Egyptian to be Afro-Asiatic with borrowings from other African language filler. So by the way, Afro-Asiatic is just, although we kind of like question the entire Greenberg films, I don't want to read into it too much because I don't even co-sign the Afro-Asiatic film. If we were to, we know that Afro-Asiatic is made up from Semitic, Omotic, Berber, Chadic, and ancient Egyptian. And all of these are African. Only the Semitic language film finds its way off the African continent. All of the other aspects are thoroughly African in every way, shape, or form. So even Afro-Asiatic itself, as many of you will know, is a misnomer. Archaeological data would seem to indicate, and by the way, the most widely spoken language in Nigeria is an Afro-Asiatic language, just for example, in Hausa, Afro-Asiatic. Archaeological data would seem to indicate an early integration of the Eastern Delta into northern Egypt by early Upper Egyptian rulers since Iri-Hor from Abydos 3250 BC or 3250 BC, who already wrote royal inscriptions in Egyptian in a script and symbolic system that used African flora and fauna. We spoke about this all the time as well. If you look at the ancient Egyptian language, it's thoroughly African in terms of the representations of the symbols. Okay, nothing comes from outside of the region. Every single species is African in origin. That's an indictment to anybody who wants to try and claim that it was a foreign influence that created anything or even influenced their language, like which they like to say, oh, well, Mesopotamian came first. It's like, no, don't try it. Mesopotamians didn't even have pictures. Okay, their language didn't develop properly. Okay, you can't compare it. The ancient Egyptian language, you can see the development from being, you know, drawn symbols to a fully, you know, fully semi-phonetic abjad to a fully phonetic script. We can see its evolution. Unless you have that, a similar kind of tale to tell for cuneiform, then you can't compare the two. Okay, cuneiform's provenance is not comparable to the ancient Egyptian one, I'm afraid. This region of Egypt and northern Egypt had long had social intercourse with the Near East. The ancient Egyptians in origin were not settler colonists akin to the European colonists in Africa. Well, actually, technically, according to Herodotus, or was it no? It was Diodorus who said that Egypt was a colony of Ethiopia. So, in some ways, yeah, but I get the point he's making. Is it didn't come from outside? Is the point? Scheunemann and Krause study is best seen as a contribution to understanding a local population history in northern Egypt as opposed to a population history of all Egypt from its inception. Okay, and I think we'll just cap off with the results that I think you guys will all be familiar with. Why is the table sideways? Oh dear, I'm yawning because I'm very tired. Excuse me. But you can see that we'll just go through it very, very, very quickly because it's sideways and probably horrible to look at. But here are the royals that were tested. So we have Thuya, Yuya, KV35, elderly lady, Amenhotep III, KV55, which is believed to be Akhenaten, but we're not sure. KV35, younger lady, Tutankhamun, Ramesses, and unknown man. And if we just quickly, unknown man is believed to be Pentawere, I believe, as well. But if we just scroll up, you can see here, I know it's sideways, guys. In fact, I'm going to just, oh Lord, I'm going to zoom in a little bit if it allows me to. No, I've just murderized it. It's not going to allow me to. I should open up the, it feels like torture to open up anything else now. I'm just going to quickly, these results, I'll read them out to you. So Sub-Saharan Africans, 93.4% match affinity, but only 6.3% East Eurasian and only 0.3% Asian. So you can see this is match probability, by the way, much closer, and it goes that way all throughout. So next one is 93.7%, next one is 71%, next one is 93.7%, next one is 41%, next one is 68%, 94%, 93.6%, and 91%. So basically they're just all, I know I could open it up. I know you want to see this, but it's late and I'm tired. I'm not gonna do it right now. I'm really sorry. Apologies, Bayous. Yeah, but forgive me. I'm being late. It's late and I'm lazy, so you have to like watch back, pause, and zoom yourself. Okay, but guys, I think we'll call it a day there. We've been going for about 2 hours, and I just wanted to, like I said, show you a bit of that study. The main headline for me that I really wanted to get across to you was how scant they were in terms of selecting these samples, and the fact that, you know, for years now I've taken for granted that there was a selection process and there was a excavation of mummies, and then I look into the study and it's like you just pulled a bunch of cadavers from some museum and from some random skull collection and then claim they all came from the same tomb, which I question strongly. You don't provide any provenance or any proof. This is as far as they go. It's just like naming these individuals this way, and it wasn't the easiest thing to look up. Okay, it wasn't the easiest thing to look up. I did try it. It wasn't the easiest thing to look up and find correspondences with that. They didn't provide any photos in the supplementary data of the cadavers that they sampled. So it really is just, in my opinion, a shit show of a study. It doesn't deserve any respect. And as you can see, as Jean-Philippe Jourdain excellently broke down, the amount of agenda and unprofessionalism in terms of the way that they reported is unbelievable. But there you go. That's it. Abusir El Meleq study is a bit of a joke. Feel free to bring it when people bring it up. Feel free to bring up how bad of a study it is and how little respect it deserves. There's not really anything here that's worth, in my opinion, kind of like this shouldn't be setting any kind of standard because it doesn't prove anything really. All right, I think we'll leave it at that. It's very late. Shout out to you. Let me give you this quickly one more plug, okay? TKM Academy. I'm going to put it in the chat one more time. I should just pin the one that I've done, but what the heck? Let's be real time. Got to put it in there now. I'll pin this one. So TKM Academy. If you want to see this grow, and I promise you it grows on a daily basis in terms of the content that's on there, in terms of the discussion that takes place, in terms of the strategizing, the training, the teaching. This really is the ultimate members area in terms of giving back to the community. So feel free to join. Enjoy the 50% discount. The price will be going up when I hit a certain milestone. So yeah, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much, guys. Appreciate your time. You are much appreciated. That is every single one of you. I really, really appreciate you. Especially, let me just give a quick shout out to all of the donors. So shout out to, oh, did I read that one? I think I did. 1 second. Yes, I did. Shout out to Blood of the Unicorns, James Stewart, Naya, Dolomite Tobias, my G, Bernard, Blood of the Unicorns again, Mariol, Angel, Nata, Mariol again, came with the dough, Mariol. Shout out to you. And Africa for Africans, kicking it all off in the best way possible. Guys, I really appreciate all of you for joining me today. And hopefully I'll see you at the Academy. Okay. But if not, I'll see you on the next live stream. Have a fantastic evening. And peace.